And welcome once again to Living in the 21st Century. Joining me today is Dr. Tara Kafori from River Educational Consulting, and also co-hosting with me today is Arthur Fitzer. Thank you both again for joining me here today on Living in the 21st Century.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. My first question goes out to you, Tara. What is River Consulting? How did you come up with that name?
River Educational Consulting is a consulting firm that is geared towards addressing non-suicidal self-injury and self-harm in other forms, such as cutting, burning, branding, and other addictions and maladaptive behaviors that are used by young adults and early adolescents. Starting at the age of 10 to 15 is usually where we see the most amount of self-harm. And the title came out of River. R is for to recognize and address self-harm. I is for intervention, where we would intervene within a school or into a particular student. V is for validate. We would validate the concerns and the issues that are occurring among our youth and be able to address them within their school, within their surrounding home environment, and within the community. And E is to educate, where we would address not only the parents, the community within the school, the community without a school, as well as the administration and staff that works with the children. And R is to restore a child to a healthy future within their school and return them into the everyday classroom as a child who has healthy coping strategies to ensure a successful future.
Whoa, that's
really a mouthful.
It's a very, it is a mouthful. It's very packed, but it was very, it was designed to put our mission statement in place, and we've moved towards that.
Yes. Well, one of the things that I think we can say for sure is that this generation that is amongst us today, for some reason, seems to be lost, whether it's in the form of technology, socially, morally. And this is to not blame or to put some bad stigma on the younger generation head. But I realize there are something seems to be missing. Whether they are abused, whether they goes to school and they're gunned down other students, there's so many different things that going on in their lives. What is your opinion on all the stigma that surrounds them? That even now more than ever, we need more people in psychology or psychiatrists to deal with some of these matters.
That is a very loaded
Yes.
question, it is a very good question. Unfortunately, we still have a world that is not comfortable talking about mental illness. We have a society that knows it exists, but chooses to avoid the true grit answers that need to come out of that discussion. I do believe that these newer generations are much more isolated than we had been in the past, and I think yes, technology is a way, because instead of talking face-to-face to a person, they can text, they can email, and that changes the dynamic of a conversation where you have more strength to say something that may come out in a non-favorable way. And it is a lot harder to also apologize with texts or emails. And I think that further isolates our children from learning the communication skills that are so essential into building a future in business or in technology or education. I don't know if it's just media, because I also believe that it has to do with the level of communication between families. I think families are very busy. We are all very scheduled. You have soccer practice, then you have lacrosse practice, then you might have a family dinner, and then everything is so scheduled that there is no downtime. And without that downtime, your brain and your whole system, your physiological system, does not have any downtime to re-regulate and also to think through, reflect. You are not allowed to breathe and meditate, or you're not allowed to think about, I could have done this or said this instead. It's just a go, 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 and that's overstimulation. So our children now, the ones that are rising in the ranks of the schools now, are learning that they cannot seem to focus for a very long time because they're just used to short term, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 45 minutes at most, and then there's no re-regulation and calm time. They just are continuing to go. And that has shifted their brain structure. In essence, literally has changed the mechanics of the brain, the operation of the brain, and the physical structure of how their brain works in comparison to past generations. And I think with that, we've created children who are very lonely, and we've created children who feel a lot more hopeless than in past times. And they also are not as creative as solving their problems as we would have expected when they have a tablet and they can look up anything on Google. But again, without the conversation of teaching them how to properly develop coping strategies, without taking the time to slow down and tell them what they need to do in order to regulate themselves, we are just going to create more and more tense, anxious, and in essence, more fragile children.
I think you're absolutely right. Is that you look at Facebook and emails and all this sort of stuff, and it's not, there's no really meaningful communication that way. The way I'm looking at you or something where I can see your facial expression and I can read your face as well as what you say.
Right.
And I think it's very counterproductive. And you ought to be careful what you say on Facebook, and especially now there's another 50 million names that have been compromised. So that discourages real communication, even if it was possible on Facebook. So I think that's something that children have to be, the schools have to address, the parents have to address, however that is. You know, when I was growing up, there was none of this. So the family was closer together in terms of communication. We did puzzles together. You know, we sit down and do these wonderful, very difficult puzzles. But it was great because we were all thinking about, you know, where does this piece go or where does that piece go?
Right.
So, but it's a very, where there's all this push to communicate using these internet aids. I don't know how you sort of educate people that that's not the best way to really communicate. I don't know, you know.
Oh, no. Yes.
Okay. No, I want to follow up on what Arthur would have just said. The parenting years ago where kids and families get around and communicate with each other, play games together. Work well, then there was that family bond and family unit.
Right.
There wasn't so much distractions. But in this new age where you're now finding kids actually giving birth to kids who aren't so mentally developed the way they ought to be developed,
Right.
could they really played an important role in parenting a child in this time and season in the way it ought to be brought up, that it can somewhat see things from a more humane standpoint, opposed to developing this urge for whether it's new technology or to go into school and gun down some students because they watch some cruel video that have an impact on the psyche. What is your opinion on that?
For me, as a parent of two young children as well, and being an educator for however many years I've been, over 17 years, there is that possibility. Even when babies have babies, even when you have the young teenagers having children, it does allow for the conversations of proper, socially acceptable, I shouldn't say proper, socially acceptable, culturally relevant lifestyle to be established that does not have to be raised in a game convention. It does not have to be raised the child does not have to be raised in a society that does not show love, that does not show empathy. It does have to go with that background discussion, again, of mental illness and mental health. How to overcome your anger, your frustration. As a teenager, you're young. If you're giving birth to a child, you're not developed yourself. You haven't even hit the emotional regulation that you would hit once you hit your 20s. There is a great deal of growing between 20 and 30 years old, and again, onward with your life. But if you haven't even made it to the 20 years, you've yet to establish where you need to be in order to raise another healthy individual person. However, you can learn, and there are programs like in New York City with the Harlem Children's Zone that have provided a great model where you are taught how to train individuals, how to train future generations, how to de-escalate themselves, how to breathe through a conflict, how to relax, take it all in, and then think about saying something before you say it. Wait the 5 seconds. How to imagine yourself on a beach in your favorite place with the wind blowing on your face, so you're not going to lash out at another student or as a teacher or at a family member. To think, it's called the 3 steps ahead, which is very common. It's what we do on a normal basis, but where would you be in 5 minutes? Where are you going to be in 10 minutes? Where are you going to be in 15 minutes? And if the 15 minutes puts you in a harmful place, go back to the 5 minutes and reestablish where you're going to go. And these are the strategies that are used that don't involve any kind of physical connection with a person who is off track with their regulation. When we do have conversations with educators, when I do speak to teachers, when I do speak to administrators, I have to first and foremost explain what it's like for the administrator to understand what that individual is going through. They need to be able to step into the feet of those that are experiencing anger. Why would they want to be at a point in their life that they would like to take a weapon into a classroom? Why are they at the point where they feel that they might have been bullied on Facebook? They might have been bullied on email. There's
That's
so
right.
much Snapchat, Instagram, all of these provide a media platform that allows for that behavior to occur. In order for the principal to fully understand where, or the school staff as a whole, a parent, as well as community members to understand, you first have to put yourself in the place of that individual. Understand who, what, when, where, why, and how before you make a decision on how you would handle that situation. And then from there, you have to then recognize where are the warning signs? Where are the symptoms that we need to address first before it gets even closer to them bringing in a weapon, or to them taking a weapon to their own hands or their legs? You know, self-harm is a very private manner. It is not always what it was historically known as, and that was an open cry for help. That's not what non-suicidal self-injury is. That's also not what always suicide looks like. They are two distinct things. They are two very distinct situations. Non-suicidal self-injury is the intent to harm, to do bodily harm, without the intent to kill, without the intent to take their own life. Suicide is the intent to take a life. There are actions that are stronger, whether it's firearms, whether it's strangulation, but there are similar signs that are evident once you go backwards. So as far as addressing it, whether they're young children, because it does start when it starts as early. There were cases as early as 8 years old. So you have cases from 8 until 15. I usually choose to span around 10 to 15 because that's when the brain is really pruning itself, and then you have hormonal regulation at the same time with puberty coming in. that is when principals need to look for those signs. Teachers need to look for those signs, and they need to get out of the way of not wanting to have the conversation with mental illness. Find those signs, find those symptoms, and then learn the coping strategies that you can positively teach the children so that they're not harming themselves in private, in their own rooms, in their bathrooms, where they're hiding it in their upper arms or their inner thighs, and starving themselves, or being promiscuous with sex, being addiction, finding the drugs. We have an opioid addiction that's growing, and teenagers are among the largest group that are self-medicating because they feel hopeless, they don't feel that they have an option, they feel lost, they don't feel like they have a support group. Education should provide a safe home for those children to go every single day. And with that being said, educators need to have these conversations, and training needs to happen in these schools. The money needs to appear to have companies like myself come in and train administrators, teachers, because there is in educational programs, there are no courses. There is no protocol to address non-suicidal self-injury, self-harm, addiction, and addressing that within a school system or addressing it within media. For the most part, educators at some point have their hands tied when it comes to media.
Well, it can be considered actually a national opioid crisis among young people, well, people as a whole here in the United States. But my question is, what would take a perfectly young person and get them involved into drugs? Is it just peer pressure? And what would also help a teacher or a family member to identify these unusual traits that child didn't used to produce before? What are some of the signs should they look for? And what process should they take in trying to rescue that problem in initial stages before it go any further?
These are very essential questions to dealing with non-suicidal self-injury and suicide and addiction. So thank you for bringing those up. The signs and the symptoms I will answer second. The first one is a child needs to feel loved and connected. And during the teenage years, as you know, if you've ever remember your teenage years, that we need to have a connection, even though we are claiming independence. So our job as educators, our job as parents, our job as community members is to make sure we are constantly recognizing them, even if it means, I like your sweatshirt today, or I see you cut your hair. Something that says, I'm here, I'm known. Because too many of our children feel lonely. They feel that they're out in a sea of millions and they're not worth your time. And that is how they're growing up. And they also are watching people on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, other forms of media that have beautiful, perfect lives, beautiful, perfect images. They're the right fit, they're the right shape, etc. So they're trying to keep up, and that causes this negative cycle over and over again. The signs that you can look for is if a child starts to show distance, if a child starts to have clothing that is longer than in the summertime, for example, if they're wearing long sleeve shirts, if they start to hide, they're wearing a lot more baggy clothes. These are physical signs that you can see. If they start to withdraw from their friends, if they're no longer going out, if they are no longer on the phone, talking on the phone, if they have even spent a lot more time in their room but they're not studying, they're just sleeping a lot more. These are all major signs of a child's in need. Their grades might be slipping. They might not have a care in the world. They describe it as not a care in the world, as one of a student yesterday described to me. And that means that they are at a point where it's time you look them in the face, which people don't like to do, and say, are you in need of help? Are you? And if you feel that it's close to suicide, you need to ask the question, are you at risk for taking your life? are you going to do anything that will harm your body? And it's a very uncomfortable question, but it's a very essential question that will save lives. And that is something that the Mental Health Institute and the Crisis Prevention Institute and Cornell University all recommend, just facing those two questions or asking them, do you need help? I think you need some guidance. How can I help you? I'm here for you. You're not alone.
I had a grandniece that tried to commit suicide twice. Okay, very nice family, and she took an overdose of pills, but then came down and told her father. So they took her to the hospital, and she was okay. But obviously, there've been a lot of signs that weren't noticed properly by her parents. So her mother was wonderful, and she had a terrible drinking problem. She ended up in AA, and that helped her immensely. And probably she really recovered well with her mother's help, who listened to her, you know. And so she's now married, living down in North Carolina, has a wonderful job. But it was such a close call, because if she hadn't come down and told her father, she probably would have died. So I think what you said about noticing the signs of that something is wrong is very, very important. But it means the parents have to be very attentive, the teachers in school.
Right.
And
normally in our society, we're told to give space. But we actually have to change that. It's not working for us. We need to recognize it's not working. We need to start to address it. We need to be more vigilant. We do need to ask. We do need to go into the rooms. And we also need to know that the majority of those who try to take their lives immediately regret it. There is so many stories that you hear about the man who let go of the rail and started to fall off the bridge and immediately regretted that, but by some grace of God had survived.
Well, it's like my grandniece. She regretted having taken the pills. She comes downstairs and tells her father.
Right.
So the minute she did it, she started to regret it and let her parents know about it.
Right.
So for the parents who has to work probably 2 or 3 jobs that barely have the time to monitor their children, the teacher, on the other hand, who has probably a classroom with significant numbers, can't be so cautious at the same very time she tries to teach or he tries to teach. Where does that put that child? We know for a fact the parent has to go out there, do 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet. She can't pay and commit that attention to her child. But in the meanwhile, that child is on serious drugs. That child is about to commit suicide. Is there any methods or methodology that can be put in place to discover something like that, even though the parent is busy or the teacher is caught up with so many things at the same time?
That is a realistic picture that you have just painted. You're right, with the amount of busyness that we do all have, and I don't want to put it on educators that they have to be responsible just for that. At no point, it does take a village, it does take the entire school community. There are telltale signs that are very evident, that are literally red flags once you stop. And again, one is the withdrawing, the one is irritable. They are irritable, they are crying without any reason for crying. The child will burst out in tears. You will have a parent who doesn't have a communication anymore. They withdraw from communicating with the parent. And then that is when, yes, even with the scarce amount of time, the parent should investigate. The teacher should then communicate to the school. There should be a crisis team that a school should have developed, and it includes teachers, it includes the principal, it would include the vice principal and the guidance, and put that team together and investigate. Talk to all of the teachers, talk to all of the parents, bring the parents in, bring the child in one-to-one, and have a school psychologist also, or an outside company like myself, come in and start to investigate before it gets to be dangerous.
Okay. Do you think in every classroom, at least once a day, with limited time,
Yes.
that the avoidance of drug abuse, the avoidance of suicidal methods be taught as a mentoring process in the classroom, that every child would get to hear this? And I mean, it should be done basically not a long time, probably 5-10 minutes, but I think it should be in every classroom that subject should be taught. The avoidance of drugs, the avoidance of suicide. I think if that is repetitively in a child's ear, it gives them something to think about.
Right.
I don't know. What's your concept about that?
I do. I think there's room to build in socially acceptable coping strategies, healthy ways of life, and what to avoid. And I do think that there is time to take away from the testing and regain humanality, which is what I like to call that form of living a healthy life and a future that is bright, and also how to form connected relationships with others. I do think that each class can relate that and culturally relevant material, even in math, even in science,
Yes.
that are more numerically based. Yes, I do. And I do think it would make a big difference, because I think once a child feels connected, once an adult feels connected, once you feel that yearning to form relationships, I do think they are more likely to have a healthy lifestyle than an unhealthy lifestyle.
What sort of resources do you think are needed that aren't available now so the schools could do this sort of work? I mean, you're one person, probably need a lot of people like you.
Yes.
And to make the schools aware that they really need to do this.
Schools are pretty smart in the fact that they do know they need it. What they need is the funding that goes behind it.
Yeah.
They really need to be able to come out and say, we are having this discussion on mental illness. We have to address this. This is a need. This is a great need. We need to find the funding. And in addition, we need to find the staff, and we need to find the resources. So there is plenty of resources. There are plenty of resources out there, and there is a great need for it. So we just need to put those together. So companies like myself would be able to come in and forge that relationship and give them what they need in order to get them on a sustainable program. Yes.
Just because I heard the president spoke about it, and I hope that the federal government would really invest some serious time and money into helping institutions like yours deal with these serious issues that are going on in the schools and young people at large, because it is indeed a national crisis.
Yes, it is. It is a national epidemic,
So
and it's growing.
definitely. And we are on our last minute. So Dr. Tara,
Good for you. Yep.
I want to thank you so much for coming here and shedding some light on what's going on.
Thank you for having
And
me.
Arthur, I want to thank you for co-hosting here today also. It was a pleasure. And for all those who have been tuning in, thank you and enjoy. Bye-bye.